The NHL Trade Deadline for 2022 has come and is gone. Today we're going to take a review of all the deals we've seen, and I'm going to discuss who I feel were the biggest trade deadline winners and the biggest trade deadline losers who just failed to get the job done. We'll discuss that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're doing a trade deadline recap. I do this every year after the deadline, kind of talk about who I feel were the trade deadline winners, the teams who I feel did the best job, and the teams out of the trade deadline losers, and who did the worst job. So obviously some teams had different objectives here. Some teams you're looking at whether or not they sold off assets that were not going to be returning or pending UFAs. What kind of returns did they get? Other teams, did they, take advantage of the situation to load up enough for the playoffs, etc.? And we'll kind of break this down. So first, let's start with the winners. And I'm going to look at about 8 or 9 teams. Now, we're not going to talk about every single team here because not every team is really, in my opinion, a winner or a loser. There's a bunch that kind of fall in the middle and that were kind of, not really winners or losers. It did okay, but not really substantial enough in either direction to kind of mention here in this video. But let me know what you think in the comments for the teams that you feel did the best job or the worst job. Now, to me, both teams in Florida, the Panthers and the Lightning, did an outstanding job here. The Florida Panthers not only added, a top flight forward in Claude Giroux, obviously going for a Stanley Cup here, but they added a solid physical defenseman in Ben Chiarot. So they added both up front and on the back end. Now, they also moved out Frank Vatrano to the New York Rangers, and they also, at the same time, used a little bit of remaining cap space to take some salary on for Max Domi and actually help out one of their competitive teams where he ended up landing in Carolina in a 3-way deal between Carolina, Columbus, and Florida. So, anything to get an extra asset. So I must say Bill Zito has done a tremendous job. Now, did they pay a pretty price to get those players? They certainly did. Chiarot and Giroux both are going to have future first-round picks gone because of those acquisitions. The Panthers are, leading the Atlantic Division, have a legit shot at a Stanley Cup. And like I said, in my opinion, I think they've got to be one of the Cup favorites here. They haven't had a team this strong probably since they went to the Cup Finals in '96, and even then you could argue this team here is probably better than that team. To me, that was a team that got hot at the right time and went on a crazy run early in its existence. So to me, this is probably the best Florida Panthers team they've ever had. Now, will they win the Stanley Cup? Will they go deep in the playoffs? It's not going to be easy. They're going to have a lot of competition, and some of these teams are going to fall short and fall on their face here, make a lot of acquisitions and not win. It's just that simple. Last time I checked, there is only one Stanley Cup. So a lot of these teams, we can look back later and say, you know what, it didn't work out. You wasted some assets. But in some of these cases, they get players not only for now, but for later as well. In Florida's case, the odds of Ben Chiarot sticking around are probably slim. Will Claude Giroux like it so much in Florida that maybe he stays and signs a free agent contract, maybe well below market value? That I would not completely rule out. Now, of course, their state rival in Tampa rebuilt that third line. Of course, the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions had their third line, which they relied on heavily of Yanni Gourde, Barclay Goodrow, as well as Blake Coleman for the last 2 cup runs. And of course, all 3 of those players are no longer with the organization due to a combination of the expansion draft and salary cap constraints. They had to get creative, but they brought in Brandon Hagel and Nick Paul to kind of help rebuild that third line. So to me, is this as strong as it was before? I'm not quite sold on that just yet, but these players do have a lot of potential. Brandon Hagel is very much a utility knife kind of player. I think they can play him in a variety of roles, but he certainly was having a solid season in Chicago. Nick Paul's more defensive minded. He's one of those guys that he's got good size, pretty good speed. He's a great athlete, great physical condition, good on faceoffs, good on the PK, but he doesn't have much finish to his game, so I'm not sure that he's going to be as strong as Goodrow or Coleman. But as hard as he works, though, I think the potential is there. Now, going out to rebuild his third line was 3 players who have been in the organization some time, all younger players drafted, developed by the Lightning, and Boris Katchouk, Taylor Radish, and Matthew Joseph. Of course, all guys that kind of got stuck in a really deep team, not able to get a bigger role, and of course now they're gone to upgrade this line. So to me, I think they did a good job. They're certainly a winner here in trade deadline for a team that had no cap space. Essentially, they were creative and figured out how to do it. We've got a rebuilt third line. I'm not quite so sure it's as strong as it was before, and I think they're going to have an even harder time winning a cup this year as they did the past two, but I still like what they've done and what they were able to do here. Now, another winner was the Calgary Flames. They got things jump-started early, one of the first deals leading to the deadline with Tyler Toffoli. They later picked up Calle Jarnkrok and Ryan Carpenter. To me, the only other thing they would have liked to have maybe seen was a depth defenseman, but they really rebuilt their middle six and bottom six a little bit with the guys that have been brought in here. Jarnkrok's got a lot of friends on the team, cousins with Elias Lindholm. Toffoli, of course, has the prior relationship with Sutter. Know some of the guys there as well from his time at the Canucks. There's a lot of connections there, so they were very careful who they brought in, but certainly great fits. Carpenter will add some extra depth in the bottom six as well. For one of the strongest teams in the West, I think they made themselves a little bit better here, and I really like what they've done, and they didn't certainly, didn't kind of break the bank doing it. They still held on to a lot of their future assets. Now, the Rangers, another team I thought did really well here. I like what they've done. Now, the Rangers, you could say, they made some really good additions, but in the form of Andrew Kopp, they did pay a premium price, but I think there's a good chance they're going to try to keep Andrew Kopp past this season, which will make it a little bit more worth it. They also picked up Tyler Mott, Frank Vetrano, and Justin Braun on the back end, so they get a depth defenseman, which is great. That gives them a little bit more steadiness on their third pair. Vetrano's already been in the lineup for a few games because he was done a little bit early. And Kopp and Mott, they basically rebuilt that bottom six as well. They got themselves a third line center in Kopp. Mott and Vetrano should add an extra element there to kind of give them an upgraded version of their bottom six. Even though the Rangers were kind of rumored for a long time to make a big, substantial swing at the deadline, I don't know if we'd call it a big swing. They made some smaller ones, but they really made themselves a much deeper team. And for a team that relies heavily on Igor Shesterkin, I think that they're going to be a little bit better defensively with these guys they added, and they should be able to be a little bit stronger overall and then balancing their scoring attack out as well. So I really like what the Rangers have done. The Wild, certainly a team I think had a good deadline, picking up Marc-Andre Fleury. Of course, we're hesitant to give up a first-round pick, so it's a conditional second with possibility of going to a first. They added Nick Delorier, Jacob Middleton, Tyson Jost. Might not seem like a lot, but Middleton and Delorier add some extra beef on the forward group and back end. Guys that are physical, not afraid to drop the gloves and just kind of protect their players a little bit. And then they have a really dynamic goaltending duo between Fleury and Talbot. To me, I think I like what Bill Guerin's did here. He didn't break the bank, and he got himself some really good players, and they're a much deeper team. I think the Wild are a team in the West that kind of gets overlooked because of Colorado and Calgary, but this could be a really solid fly under the radar kind of team that goes further. Of course, they subtracted Victor Rask, Nico Sturm, and Kaapo Kähkönen in regards here to make those deals. Kähkönen's unfortunate they gave up on a young goalie, but they're in go-for-it mode. They're going to have some serious cap issues the next few years, and they want to make the best of this year before that really kicks in. So overall, Billy G did a good job. Now, the Anaheim Ducks I have down as a winner as well. Pat Verbeek, the new GM, said he was not going into the deadline with players unsigned and not trading them, and he did exactly just that. He traded Hampus Lindholm, Josh Manson, Nick Delorier, and Rickard Rakell, all players that were rumored to be on the move. He brings in guys like Dominic Simon and Zach Aston-Reese from the Pittsburgh Penguins. So certainly some help in the middle and bottom six. They get Drew Helleson, a real solid prospect in return from the Avalanche for Manson. They get Vakanainen from the Bruins. Plus they get some picks in there as well. So to me, they did a real good job. Not only did they do good asset management by moving their pending UFAs that they were unable or unwilling to re-sign, but they get really solid returns. They get some good future assets and lots of picks and some good young players that are going to help rebuild that blue line and forward group for the future. So to me, they did themselves a real solid job in that regard. The Boston Bruins had a good deadline. Pick up Hampus Lindholm from the Ducks, who we just talked about. Sign him to an 8-year extension. So yeah, they paid a pretty penny, but when you're getting them signed for 8 years at $6.5 million, to me, that's a good contract. Did a great job there. They also added Josh Brown, some beef on the back end. He's a 6'5", I think he is, a 230-pound defenseman from Ottawa. Not the greatest defensively, but in a limited role, he can be decent. You just got to make sure you give him sheltered minutes and don't ask too much of him, but he can play a role and be an extra depth guy. If he's your number 7-8 guy, it's fine, but more than that, you're asking a little bit too much. But Hampus Lindholm will pair with Charlie McAvoy and then really give them a much more dynamic top pair defense and really help this Bruins team be real solid going into the playoffs. The Montreal Canadiens did a tremendous job. Ken Hughes has been doing wonderful things as the GMs after getting started there, along with Jeff Gordon. Of course, they did mostly selling off, but they got excellent returns. They traded Sherratt. They traded Lehkonen. They traded Kulak. They moved on from Andrew Hammond after he came in to help them out for a brief stint, but they got real solid returns. In the Lehkonen trade, they got a real good return. Not only did they get Justin Barron, but a high pick as well. Got a first rounder for Sherratt. The Kulak return was good. They did a real solid job in Montreal, and they really set themselves up for the future there as well. So I really like what Montreal did. The Avalanche you could throw in, even though I don't have them on the thumbnail as a winner, they did pretty good as well. Getting guys like Josh Manson, Arturi Lehkonen, Andrew Cogliano. They added some size and strength to their blue line, which was a big reason why they didn't go further in the playoffs the last couple of years. They add some solid players up front like Lehkonen and Cogliano who can be like utility players, play a variety of roles, kill some penalties for them, and at the same time give a little bit of secondary scoring. So to me, they all did a solid job. Now, on to the losers of the deadline. We're going to start with the Islanders, who did absolutely nothing. What in the heck is Lou Lamoriello thinking? This is a team that took a major step back this year, and I understand, like a lot of teams, you could point to some really good excuses, like their schedule to start the year while they were waiting for the new arena to get up was a brutal start because of the brutal schedule. They had a major battle with COVID, as did other teams, so I get all that. But this team is clearly older, not skilled enough, too slow. There's a lot of reasons here to be concerned about the Islanders moving forward. And not only did he not sell off any underperforming players, which I know can be challenging to do, but he also re-signs pending UFAs Cal Clutterbuck and Zach Parise. What are you thinking? You had a chance to move on from some of these vets and bring in some, leave yourself more flexibility, and you didn't do it. Parise, I understand for what he's getting paid. Did an okay job. He's on a league minimum contract with some bonuses built in. Okay, I can live with that. But I think it's time that identity line of Martin, Clutterbuck, and Cizikas. Casey Cizikas is a good hockey player, but Clutterbuck and Martin's spent a lot of time injured this year. It's time to move on. They need to get more skilled. They need to get faster. They need to get younger. They have a major hole and up front in scoring, and they didn't do anything to address it. Now, I understand there's the offseason, but still, I would have liked to seen Lou sell off a couple veteran players, even if it means having to give an extra asset, something to give them more flexibility going into next year. But they kind of punted it down the road saying that they believe in this team, and, it's just basically a blip. And I don't think it is. I mean, there's a lot of things to like about this team, don't get me wrong. Ilya Sorokin is a clear-cut number one goalie. Noah Dobson's emerged as a top-flight defenseman. They do have a solid year out of Brock Nelson, but even, they need some wingers for Matthew Barzal. Anders Lee's come on late in the season here, but it's just a little too late. There's lots to like, but there's lots of concerns too. And they need to have a solid offseason. I tell you, the Islanders fans seem to be really having some major issues here with Lou sitting on his hands, doing absolutely nothing. And it's really, really concerning. The offseason for them is going to be imperative, or they're going to be in major trouble for a while here. Now, the Ottawa Senators, another loser, and I'm putting them as a loser for acquiring Travis Hamonic. The other deals they've done weren't so bad. They traded off, obviously, Josh Brown and Zach Sanford for some picks, which is fine. The Joseph and Paul deal, I have no issue with that. I really like Matthew Joseph. I think he can equally give you what Nick Paul did. But acquiring Travis Hamonic, making $3 million next year for a third-round pick when he was on waivers this year, and lots of reports coming out of Vancouver that his teammates are super happy to get rid of him, that's a head-scratcher. This blue line needs work, and it needs work fast. And this is not the answer. Now, the only thing that will make this better is if they're able to move on from Nikita Zaitsev. And obviously that's going to happen in the offseason now because it didn't happen at the deadline. So you can't go into next year with your right side being Zub, Zaitsev, and Hamonic. You're going to be just asking for another terrible start. The team is going to lose out in the playoffs yet again. And you're going to be wasting all this young talent because there's lots to like about this team. But certainly they have some holes. And if they don't work on filling those holes, pro scouting has been such an issue with this team. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I know that's a big part of the job that Pierre Maguire is supposed to be doing when he was brought in. And I don't know what they're thinking there. They need to get some pro scouts that actually have a freaking clue because everybody they bring in is absolutely terrible and just can't play. So we'll give Travis Hamonic the benefit of the doubt that maybe he can fit in and be okay. But he certainly, in my opinion, is not the answer. The Seattle Kraken also I have down as deadline losers. They sold off a lot of assets, which is the right thing to do. But in my opinion, they got a lot of underwhelming returns. If you look at what some of the defensemen fetched for a trade return, they didn't get a first-round pick out of Mark Giordano. I know maybe they were trying to do him a solid and send him to Toronto, and maybe they were kind of handcuffed a little bit that way. But still, it's a situation where, to me, they got a lot of players off the books, which was great. It's right, they have a lot of picks. They have more picks than players under contract, which is good in a way. But to me, this has been a disaster from the start. They had so much opportunity to make this better from the get-go, and it's just been a failed experiment here so far. I don't have a lot of faith in Ron Francis, to be completely honest. Washington, they picked up Marcus Johansson and Johan Larsson. Daniel Sprong is out. Not to say anything's wrong with those pickups. I'm just not convinced they're a better team. This is an aging team like the Penguins and some other teams that they're still good, but their window, for competing at a high level is slowly shrinking here. Obviously, Ovechkin, Backstrom, etc., not getting any younger, but they're still playing real solid hockey. And as much as these deals were not terrible, I just don't see how they got better. So I can't call them a winner. I don't think I can say it's kind of neutral. To me, they're a deadline loser, and that's just all I got to say about that. The St. Louis Blues, even though they had a pretty solid year, they certainly have some issues on that blue line. Picking up Nick Leddy and Luke Witkowski from Detroit, again, to me, not the answer. I mean, we know Doug Armstrong doesn't like rental players, but that's what he ended up getting. And a lot of these other defensemen, that I know the price tags were high, and I understand why he might have been reluctant to do it, but he waited so long that he didn't really get one of the better ones. And he sends out Jake Wallman and Oscar Sundqvist and a pick. I'm not convinced that they get better at all. I mean, Wallman was, not super young anymore, so he's still kind of a prospect, but, an older prospect. Sundqvist, has had his moments as well as a decent player, had some injuries too. But still, to me, I just don't know that their defense is going to hold up at this point. And I just don't really... To me, that's a way better move for Detroit than it was for St. Louis. I think there was lots of other options that were available to Armstrong, and he didn't take advantage of it. And I understand the prices were probably a big part of that. But going into this kind of what you call an arms race here in the playoffs, I just don't see how the Blues kept up. They've kind of been falling back a little bit. This Western Conference, to me, is Colorado and Calgary, with Minnesota kind of being your wild card. Those are the teams most likely, in my opinion, to come out of the West. The Blues just took a big step back by not really improving when these other teams certainly did. So those are your winners and losers in my humble opinion. Of course, I want to know what you think. I'm sure many of you out there will have different opinions. So let me know what you think down in the comments. We can discuss further and we'll kind of go from there. But this is certainly your place to get all your NHL news. So if you're new, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.